Dorkon Rimdan. I am a professional events compere, a radio and TV presenter, a voiceover artist, menstrual health advocate, and host of the Roadshow on Cool FM Abuja. It is my esteemed honor to be your compere for today's event. With a rousing applause, the chairperson for the public presentation of 2023 Rosa Luxemburg Foundation Supported Research in Nigeria, Professor Etanibi Alemika. Please keep on the...
I think we're here. I'm asked to make an opening address as chairperson again. I was drafted to this by Angela to chair this session. And I'm glad to do that because that's what I've spent the last 4 decades and more doing. At least pretending to be a student all my life, studying a subject all my life. So whenever there is an opportunity to learn, I'm quite interested in coming. I'm too old to become a politician. I'm too old to be a trader. So I continue to be a student to learn something. So with the 3 publications, I'm glad to come to learn something about it, and they're very vital to our life, as I want to know. So we're here on the invitation of Rosa Luxemburg's Foundation, and I'm sure many of us know the foundation. I think the government of Germany has these foundations, I think 6 of them, that are linked to their main 6 political parties. So those foundations represent the sentiments of different, this. And Luxembourg is probably the more radical of them. You find the others belong to Iraq. But Rosa Luxembourg is the more, I'm not using the word Marxist, so please don't put it in my mouth, but it's the more historical materialist among the foundations, with a lot of also histories around labor and the rest of it and issues. So again, I'm very happy that they're leading in this way. I have some affiliation with them right in South Africa throughout the different organization, Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, which they supported a long time ago, so I'm familiar with what they do. So we're here. It's going to be an interesting period for us to learn from the 3 publications that they have put out for us on very important subject confronting Nigeria. So it's my pleasure to welcome the regional director from Dakar. We've exchanged some view about his migration to different places, and then, of course, the work, the temperament in Senegal and the rest of them. So colleagues from Nigeria, I think it's an opportunity. And almost everybody here, and I think that's why it's going to be difficult to manage it. We seem to know each other. And so please, as much as possible, let's manage meeting within meeting because of our familiarity. There's going to be coffee break, or at least at some point, we can do those discussions we've not had the opportunity to do for a very long time during those meetings. And having lost some minutes, I think we should be brief, as much as possible when we have the microphone. So let me lead in that respect by not using my 10 minutes, reducing it to 5 minutes. Also, I must, a lot of Veritas here. It's nice that the Veritas are here. I wish other universities are here, because this is one way for learning. And this is another opportunity for recruitment. Many of us became teachers only because we saw our teachers also learning and teaching. And the only way to motivate people, especially in a country where the teachers have lost their ranking, we need to stimulate people to be there. So young people, young lecturers here from Veritas, I hope other university, it is not a misfortune to be a lecturer. Did you hear me? If I come back to this world, I'll be a lecturer. My temperament, that is what it can accommodate most. Independent thinking and independent action, independent agency. That's my temperament. And that is what lecturing, that's what scholarship offer you. So I encourage you not just to take this as a ceremony, but actually challenge yourself. What is my purpose in life? And if your purpose is to be able to have sphere of authority, sphere of influence, and then of course some autonomy, I think the work that you require is actually the work of scholarship. And as a researcher or as a teacher or also combining both. So I really want to also now at this point to welcome, as Nigerian says, the Roko in the house, because I think without the regional director's authorization, we probably wouldn't be having this. So I want to invite you to take the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for everyone who's already here. Thank you, Mrs. Rimdan. Is that correctly pronounced, I hope? Professors, doctors, and fellows, and all the distinguished academic degrees that are here. Only adjectives, as Prof said, but let's say all distinguished individuals that are here by your qualities, not only the degrees you have, but by the qualities of reflecting critically what society is about. Now, the two previous speakers almost said everything I was going to say. I was introduced to German political foundations. It's done. So thank you, Prof, for that. Yes, Rosa Luxemburg is the most left, if those categories still apply. And it is, if we don't use a person's adjective, if we don't use that word Marxist, we may say, yes, we are devoted to democratic socialism, we are devoted to a historical, materialist, critical, dialectic view of the world. That's four very nice adjectives, I think, that describe very well, I think, the way of thinking that, the tradition of Marx and those that have followed him in philosophy and writing have put across. So I think in the spirit of Rosa Luxemburg, we can also say those three studies that we are looking at, she would be very, very proud of those studies and those subjects that we have chosen. Because she was not only a brilliant analytic economist and so on, she was also extremely compassionate about her fellow citizens, about every individual that she met, and even animals. There is a little writing she wrote about a bull being mistreated by its owners while she's observing that. So this compassion, I think, reflects in those studies. It reflects in those studies because we're talking about the effects of situations, actions of people to a specific group of people, and in this case, mainly on women. And this focus on women also has its good reason, because in the foundation, we're trying to become, and Angela is a very good part of that team, we're trying to become also a little more feminist, because we believe it's part of what we need to be these days in the 21st century. So, looking at the effects, if we look at this study on the sit-at-home effects on women, Rosa Luxemburg was a political activist. She was for action, for demonstration, she was also a revolutionary. But she always would think about, if we do this, what does that mean to also those people that we want to protect? And if it has adverse effects, we should at least consider them. And every action has its downsides. So it's very important, I think, that we did this study. I think it's also very important that we do a study on the daily life and the daily work of domestic workers. I think we're certainly not the first people that are doing this, but I think it's still a topic to be to be elaborated more on. And then obviously also the farmer herder crisis is, I'm not telling you news there, is the most serious crisis right now hitting Nigeria, hitting the north of Nigeria, and the center, not only the north. So also there to see how women in internally displaced people camps are affected by this crisis is a very pertinent work. One last word, because Ms. Rimdon said research funding in Nigeria is at a historic low. This has shocked me. This has shocked me because I can proudly say, to some extent, I am also a result of Nigerian academic institutions. In 1992, I spent 3 months in Nigeria, and I was enjoying the hospitality of institutions like the University of Ibadan, mostly, but also I was in Jos, at the University of Jos, I was in Lagos, I was in Kano, I was in Zaria, I was in Sokoto, road traveling at the time, also not that easy these days. And I enjoyed the hospitality of people like Dr. Adigun Agbaje, at the time Dr. Abubakar Momo, and so many others that helped me in my research at the time on civil society in Nigeria, which ended up to be my master's thesis. So thanks to Nigeria and to its academic institutions, and I hope that funding issue is going to be fixed to some extent. Thank you very much.
And for her keynote address, Professor Joy Ngozi Ezielu, S-A-N-O-O-N. I hope I didn't do too much. She deserves every single word.
Thank you so much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the chair of today's occasion, Professor Atani Alimeke, who is always cerebral, all of those qualifications and adjectives represent you, and you know that. I know it. So, and I'm glad that you continue, after 4 decades or more, to continue to give back to your society, to our society, to the world, and always, always committed to the cause you believe. I am proud of you. I want to also recognize the regional representative here, Mr. Damudrinda. It was really nice hearing you talk about those being part of the academia in Nigeria, and the work you did in the 90s, and how easy it was, to travel in those days. I recall, my disease husband telling me, it was 1999, I was a fellow at the University of California, Irvine, and usually I move around by night bus. And not just night bus, we were women in Nigeria then, we travel from Enugu from Calabar to Maiduguri, we were just fearless, doing our activism, doing our scholarship and moving, and it wasn't a problem. We'll arrive a place, in the morning, Lagos, I'll finish my business, jump in the next. So that year, as I was even about to, I came back and my husband sent word, please don't come by night bus, so things have changed. I spent 3 months, of research in Irvine. And I'm like, what? He said, no, there have been a lot of, kidnapping, robbery on the road, you shouldn't. So that means, usually I'll come into Lagos in the evening, and I'll straight to the, the Jibowu time, and then I'll enter the night bus. Then even Abuja wasn't that international route as such, so everything was Lagos. So, things are no longer at ease, and we hope we can take back our country and have the security and also reduce the level of violence. And this is part of why we are here. When my sister Angela Oda, who is the program manager for Nigeria, RSLS or F, as you wish, if you want to speak the German one, Stefan or Foundation. So which one do they do, RLS or RLF? It's always an issue with the German Foundation, here. So, but I think anyone works. When she invited me for this and talked about research, because we are unapologetically have a binding interest in this area. And like Professor Alimeke said, yes, in my next world, I think I will still choose, the profession I've chosen, to be in the avatar, however discouraging or demotivating, especially for our younger colleagues. You tell them it's difficult to keep them, say, look, it's no longer, it's true, it's no longer as, but I think the academic freedom, to be here, to research and theorize, and importantly engage in research that leads to social transformation, still keep you going, as an activist scholar and a feminist for myself. I mean, it keeps me going. And it's exercising that drives the world. If we just lose it and hope, then we have nothing. So the tax, I kept wondering, because I had a lot of issues. Some of you may have been following social media and heard about Air France and some people being stranded in Chad. I was one of those. So that meant that my initial plan to return on Thursday, go back to Enugu, come back again, here, and then have time to prepare my presentation. Wherein we were just a bit disoriented, but we are still very happy that we were on ground when the gusty wind, or what could have been called tornadoes, happened and impacted on our flight that led to us being grounded in Chad, en route Abuja. So I was wondering, I said, really, with all this three research I have to go through, what exactly am I supposed to do in this keynote address? Speak to those researchers, and then when I saw the draft program, I saw also that there will be opportunity for all of them to also still speak on the research. But then anyway, I figured out a role for me, and a role of part of what I saw as the interconnections and interrelatedness of those researches. And then I said, yes, the underlying or commonalities or the common denominator will have to deal with the issue of gender-based violence. And the issue of gender-based violence and conflict, and then even within the conflict, gender is cross-cutting also as well. That then I may look at it from the perspective of general, gender-based violence, given the global and the national statistics in terms of where we are and what's going on in this area, and how does it in fact impact Nigeria. And then from that and that prism, then I can talk about the trade research, give a bit of synopsis of those research and the findings and conclusion, and then my final thoughts. So this is exactly what is, what I will do in this keynote address. The chairperson, how many minutes do I have? I'll work with it, because in the end, I think I ended up with 17 pages. And I said, this keynote, if it's 17 pages and I keep talking to it because I'm not gonna read it, I may spend an hour and I believe I don't have it. So let me just look exactly at what I have. You see, this will have guided me so that I don't work too hard like I did, okay? The keynote, this will have guided me in all ways. When you look at it, one of the things we learn with the UN and being UN Special Rapporteur, sometime over 70 countries will ask you questions in interaction, and they give you 15 minutes to respond. So you will just have an idea that obviously nobody expects you to, answer all the questions. So you pick and choose. So on a serious note, talking about the issue of the context of gender-based violence, or call it violence against women, and some call it sexual and gender-based violence, and we can use this interchangeably, but we know what it means. So one of the things I did, just to reinforce the global overview of this phenomenon, is to say that the UN and UN Women's Report of 2021 estimate that 736 million women, almost 1 in 3, have been subjected to intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both, at least once in their lifetime. And we're talking of 30% of women aged 15 and older. And this figure does not include sexual harassment. The rates of depression, anxiety disorders, unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, and HIV are higher in women who have experienced violence compared to women who have not, as well as other health problems that can even last after the violence has ended. Furthermore, information reveals that globally, violence against women disproportionately affects low and lower middle income countries and regions. But I tell you, it's global, but then there are socioeconomic underlining that make some people or regions or certain class more vulnerable. Adult women account for nearly half, 49% of all human trafficking victims detected globally. And this I can tell you because I was the UN Special Rapporteur on trafficking in persons globally for 6 years between 2008 and 14. So I saw firsthand the problem as I traveled to over 100 countries of the world, what this means, and there is no one country, for example, that I visited and I did not see Nigerians in trafficked situation. So women and girls altogether account for 72%, representing more than 3 out of every 4 child trafficking victims. And most women and girls are trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation, but not exclusive, because labor exploitation is also there. Not surprisingly, again, it was found that women, when they want to assert authority or aspire to exert power at any level, they often face a backlash that can include violence, whether psychological, emotional, physical, sexual, or economic, and also followed by discrimination of all sorts. So the society in some cultures, we know that some cultures condone some aspect of violence. It has been revealed that 18% of ever partnered women and girls aged between 15 to 49 have experienced physical or sexual partner violence. And we witnessed a surge even during COVID time, COVID-19. In fact, one of the things I did that I never had siesta throughout those lockdowns and months of not going. And for people that travel a lot like me, it was a big deal. But I tell you, I didn't miss traveling. In fact, I was one of those, the last flight out of New York, and I left exactly on 16th of March to Nigeria. And shortly after, every border was closed. Already they had closed for other countries. New York was like a ghost city. So when I got back, one of the things I did during the COVID time, giving back to my community, was also running and attending to hotlines by, WACO, Women's Aid Collective, and taking cases and mediating online. And I went on few occasions to court as permitted, because initially lockdown affected and afterwards so I was very busy, within, the house without stepping out, working really very hard for women. So I had this, even during that period, we had to even organize a protest in terms of the spike that we are witnessed. And then the issue of law here, I think we can come back to it, as there is no legally binding comprehensive international law on violence against women and girls. CEDAW, a landmark women's treaty, failed to cover what was identified already in the International Conference on Population and Development, and also Beijing Declaration and Program of Action that look at violence as a critical area of concern for women. But of course, we have also soft international law, but at regional level, we are kind of better off because we have the African Charter on Rights of Women in Africa, which is otherwise called Maputo Protocol. And this Maputo Protocol, adopted in 2003, also have specific provision that criminalize not violence against women, but urges the government to take a number of action to protect women from there. I looked also in this, my keynote, the issue of the Nigerian dimension of gender-based violence or violence against women. And it has become an epidemic, spreading across communities and regions of the country. And the lack of accountability, and Prosalimiki will tell you that and prove, because he's been working with police for that, effective and responsive support system for victims and survivors, especially low prosecution of cases, encourage impunity in committing violence-related offenses against the female gender in particular. If there are no consequences for any crime, people will want to get away with it, so the impunity continues. So offenders get away with crimes due to lack of due diligence in investigation and prosecution, evidence, witness support, including delays and corruption in the criminal justice system. And victims have been re-victimized and doubly jeopardized by society and in the justice system delivery ecosystem. And the forms and manifestation, including the trend, within Nigeria, You can say it includes rape, incest, spousal beating, sexual harassment, trafficking, female genital mutilation, forced child marriage, bride price dowry, child domestic worker, house help phenomena, acid attack, emotional abuse, abandonment, political violence. These practices are influenced by social patriarchy, religion, tradition, cultural practices throughout the country. And the emergence of Boko Haram terrorist group has escalated the sexual and gender-based violence in the form of sexual slavery, abduction, kidnapping, trafficking of girls as mercenary and comfort women, to provide for sex for the insurgents, forced marriage to terrorists, and sex for food, especially in the northeast and the northwest of Nigeria and in so many IDP camps. These untoward happenings are having a significant impact on women, children with disabilities, resulting in huge unmet justice needs. It is of concern that a significant number of girls who were abducted by Boko Haram from Chibok and Damascus in Borno State, since 2014, and I was still a special rapporteur at UN. I was in New York, in particular, when this incident happened, and almost every radio station, television station wanted to talk to me. And I gave quite a number of interviews. So it is really, my heart breaks that how many years after, a decade after, some of these girls are still yet to be reunited with their family. And Boko Haram has used widespread abduction of girls and boys as part of insurgency. Now it is even beyond the Boko Haram to banditry, to the economy, a whole economy around kidnapping and abduction all around Nigeria. Nowhere is safe. So I have other statistics I wouldn't bother you with by UNICEF recent report, and 1 in every 4 Nigerian girls also the kind of violence they experience. We also looked at the issue of women and girls, including people living with disabilities, and from available statistics, how they are also affected. So all of these are moving away, but what is important is to know that rape, for example, as a sexual violence, is on the rise, with underage girls falling the most victims. Actual data on the cases of sexual violence is not known because of its hidden nature, which makes it difficult to document in public. However, data from the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption RULAC and the EU project managed by British Council reveals that as of 2021, a total of 21,260 persons accessed the sexual assault referral centers services across the countries in Nigeria. But when you look at records of conviction and prosecution, about 1,524 arrests only were made, 253 cases charged to court, 14 convictions secured. You can see that they are far in between in terms of the conviction reported cases, the arrest and prosecution of those. So in the criminal justice ecosystem, the police and other administrators of justice often fail to protect victims of GBV, sometimes dismissing it. National surveys have been done, including by WACOL, by Clean Foundation, the National Crime and Safety Survey that was carried out, and I think under the chairmanship, you were the chairman of the board of Clean, under the issue of in 36 states. And it revealed that only 23% of rape incidents in Nigeria were reported to the police. Thus, about 77% goes unreported. And then you know what that means. And then also, in a recent survey carried out by WACOL Women's Aid Collective in 2023, the findings revealed that victims of sexual abuse and exploitation would prefer to solve their own problems without involving law enforcement agents or seeking redress in the law courts. Even when some of the women manage to make it to the law courts, judicial attitudes are often very patriarchal, and precedents, prevent them actually from getting justice. And most of the judicial decisions are often gender biased. We know there are laws, including Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act and its equivalent Violence Against Persons Prohibition laws of 35 states of the Federation of Nigeria. We also have the constitutional provision against torture. We have also the NAPTIP Act and several and extant laws of different states in Nigeria that have criminalized this. But despite that, violence and gender-based violence continue unabated. So now let's get to this research. I guess I'm doing well with it. I can round up in the next 15 minutes or 10. The gender-based violence and nexus to these 3 studies supported by RLS. Unarguably, you look at the term violence against women, it confines itself, when you talk of women, to females, women. Whilst when you talk about gender-based violence or sexual-based violence, is an umbrella term for all forms of violence affecting males and females. However, in practice, it is used to refer to violence against women perpetrated by women or men when gender inequality is the root cause. For far too long, women have borne the brunt of conflict in Nigeria, as well as gendered violence. From north to south of Nigeria, women have been affected by conflict, insurgency, other crises, including the quest by minorities and indigenous groups for self-determination. The 3 research reports in focus is 1, the effects of Gwari conflict and Enugu sit-at-home on women. And the second piece of research is experiences of domestic workers in northwest Nigeria. And the last is on impact of the farmer header crisis on women and girls in IDPs within North Central. So these 3 vital independent studies supported by Rosa Luxemburg-Stephan remind us of how intertwined and insidious conflict and gender-based violence are. Their root causes, impact, consequences on women and children. And in this section, we should consider, albeit briefly, each of these studies in summary for their significance for preventing and combating gender-based violence and mitigating conflict and societal phenomena that impact women, children, and others. First is the effect of Gwari conflict and Enugu sit-at-home. This study was conducted in Gwari, and you hear more about that, in FCT in the North Central region and in Enugu State in the southeast of Nigeria. And it examined the effect of conflict on women using a comparative study approach. And the cases of Gwari conflict and the Enugu sit-at-home protest strategy were compared and contrasted with a focus on their effect, their particular effect on women. And the research question specifically investigated the effect of Gwari conflict and Enugu sit-at-home on women. And the conflict involved the Bagiya people who were predominantly farmers and they live primarily in the hinterlands of Abuja. On the other hand, in terms of the conflict actors identified in the study in the Southeast Zone, it includes the movement for the actualization of sovereign state of Biafra, MASOB, the Biafran Zionist movement, BZM, and of recent entry, the indigenous people, people of Biafra, IPOB, amongst other related separatist groups. So what are the effects of I just give a quick summary of the effects of sit-at-home on women. The forceful enforcement of this sit-at-home across the geopolitical zone, of course, is widespread, not just restricted to the Enugu, but the study was restricted to the Enugu. And respondents generally identified many adverse effects of the sit-at-home, and chief among them, the human cost, the educational cost, the economic, psychological effect, indiscriminate killings, violence, kidnapping, even at times stampede. People just all of a sudden, if you dare come out on Monday, they will just say, there are killings somewhere. At times people don't wait to see, and everybody stampede ensues and people die even from that. And it exacerbates food security as people cannot even go to farm on certain days. The impact of the conflict on women's political quest, even because if you have such a violent, tense environment, even the women wouldn't want, to even contest election. So if you look at quickly at the issue of impact of farmer header crisis on women and girls in internally displaced camps, the farmer header crisis, and the regional director of Rosenberg mentioned this, has lingered, is something that has lingered for far too long. with an enormous toll on communities and farmers, especially women farmers who have been sexually, physically assaulted and in some cases died from the attacks. In addition, many have been left widowed by this ugly phenomenon, which is rife in North Central, especially Plateau and Benue State. And according to the survey, the farmer header crisis in North Central has deep historical roots, and I believe you hear more from them, and primarily arising from dispute over access to land, water resources, and changing socioeconomic dynamics. And this protracted conflict has had enduring, socioeconomic, political repercussions, and even national security implications. And over time, the clashes, have precipitated a general climate of insecurity, and it's no longer just North Central. It is very rife in other parts of Nigeria. So what is the consequence? We know death, we know so many other things, and some people now live in IDP camps, which is supposed to be protection because they've been sacked basically from their communities. And even when they are there, they become also vulnerable to gender-based violence. So the effect and the impact as a gender-based violence. So I looked at it in this keynote, and I will not be able to illustrate all of it. But the important thing is that this study explores the impact of the farmer header crisis on the quality of life of women and girls residing in IDP camps, drawing upon a mixed methods, which they will explain more. They were able to they consider the prevalence of gender-based violence and mental health imperative among the target population that were studied. And the research question examine the interconnecting factors influencing women and girls during farmer header crisis in North Central. What are the existing responses to issues related to women and girls during this? So the farmer header crisis has resulted in displacement, loss of lives, injuries, creating a significant humanitarian challenge. It has implications for national security as well. So as rightly observed by the study, the ongoing farmer header crisis in various regions in Nigeria has generated significant humanitarian concern and actually exacerbated food security. And women and girls, if the findings affirm the view of how women have been, become actual victims in all of this phenomena. So I examined all of some other issues that I won't be able to speak to. So and finally on this, the study underscores the urgent need for targeted interventions and policies to improve the lives of women and girls in IDP camps that are affected by this phenomenon. And it calls for a comprehensive approach that addresses the needs, promotes gender equality, and recognizes the importance of investment in communities. To the last part of experiences of domestic workers in northwest of Nigeria. So this study documented the experiences and conditions of domestic workers, the role of stakeholders, and the strategies used to mitigate domestic work abuses in the northwest of Nigeria. It examined the policy and legal framework, gaps and implementation challenges regarding domestic work protection in Nigeria. It also provided a conceptual review across relevant sections in line with crucial practices and situations of female workers. So domestic worker, was defined. It's also, they use interchangeable, the phenomena of house helps. And these are common phenomena in Nigeria, and women and children are mainly used in what has become exploitative labor. I was the UN Special Rapporteur and we worked hard for the ILO Convention 189. And I recall the day it was passed in Geneva. I was in Geneva, Switzerland, also reporting to Human Rights Council. And we did celebrate this because it was a major breakthrough and a major protection framework for domestic workers, and seeing it as a work that deserves all protection under labor laws. And this is not so for Nigeria. So as is defined, I think one of the issues that is contentious there is that in Nigeria, it is debatable whether a domestic worker, for all intent and purpose, can be considered as an employee within the context of employer-employee relations, or in other words, does domestic servant contractual relationship enjoy a statutory level as asked by the researchers, like that of an employer-employee relation? From the Labour Act, it appears to be excluded. However, Nigeria is a member of ILO, and the National Industrial Court in Nigeria is statutorily empowered to enforce ILO Convention at domestic level. And to that extent, all of the ILO, international laws, treaties have kind of been transformed to domestic regimes or legal regimes. So to that extent, one can conclude that any violation of the ILO Convention comes within the contemplation of Nigerian law. And native law is there. It criminalizes the use of children under age for domestic work, unless they are living within family circle. And even when they are living within extended family circle, does that necessarily remove the abuse and exploitation? It doesn't. Where do you draw the line between child abuse, neglect, or child labor that is for socialization of the child and child exploitative labor? So I looked at other laws which also were looked at. I had my views. So, but finally, on the findings and interrelatedness to GBV, the study found that despite these provisions, criminal abuse of domestic workers is prevalent among employers in Nigeria. And domestic workers face many cases of abuse. I can tell you, we handle a lot of those cases in Wagola. And even in my class as a teacher, I started teaching children's law, women's right, and the law in Nigeria. In 1997, I introduced it, and even in the National University's curriculum. And it's a big part of what I teach: child labor, child abuse and neglect, and the issues of always telling students and even women, look, this is this. And I'm beginning to even see for Southeast region, it looks like also a phenomenon that is on increase. You see all kinds of terrible assault. Even during that COVID time, I had to represent a child in court that had nail drilled in his skull by the madam. And I was very happy that I got the couple sent to prison, even during that COVID time. And now they've been properly convicted. So there were calls for key players on what to do. So let me conclude. My conclusion, and moving forward, is that the RLS has partnered with critical stakeholders in the academia, in government, and non-governmental organizations. It's like triple helix, and such as including faith-based organizations. Charis Healthcare Foundation was one of those that did this, Bayero University, Kano, and then also other researchers from, which one is the one in Warri? Veritas University. So concerning the prevalence of GBV, the study found that even the IDP camps are breeding grounds for gender-based violence, including sexual harassment and assault. And this is not just their finding. I recall my colleagues, 3 of them, UN Special Rapporteur, came to Nigeria and went to the IDP camps in North, and they found sex extortion, sex for food, and their findings, it was the independent, the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Slavery, the Special Rapporteur on Sale of Children and Child, and another one, and these findings are there. So concerning the prevalence of GBV, the studies have found that they are breeding grounds, IDP camps. And this is not also strange. We see this everywhere. I am currently one of the 3 United Nations experts on Sudan conflict, the ongoing conflict in Sudan. And that's part of the journey of coming from, looking at the people are in refugees camps all over, whether in Chad, whether in Egypt, whether in Uganda, whether in Kenya. We just went to Nairobi just less than 10 days ago and spent like 1 week talking to some of these people. And you see that even protection camps, even within Sudan, whether RSF or SAF, is a ground for also violation of women's rights. So conflict, you can say that. So domestic worker study was conducted to document these experiences, and also some of the ones in the former headers and IDP. So these 3 pieces of research contribute to a growing body of knowledge and jurisprudence on conflict-induced displacement and its gender-specific impact, especially on how it is either a cause or a consequence of gender-based violence. This surveys throw light on the unique challenges faced by women and girls in Nigeria and the effects of GBV, whether in conflict setting, sit at home, or for domestic workers. And the findings provide important insight for government, policymakers, academia, industry, and civil society organizations, especially service providers, including faith-based organizations, on possible intervention to prevent, to combat, to mitigate the suffering and empower those affected, bring succor to them. And again, to bring women on the peace table in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. So the three reports have shown and reinforced the gendered vulnerabilities of women to GBV in domestic and public spheres and also in IDP camps. And GBV responses and prevention will require establishing programs and services that will respond effectively to them. Undoubtedly, we can create a more inclusive and harmonious society by empowering women and giving them opportunity and power even to resist this. So I would like to end my presentation by appreciating the strategic funding support the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation provided to enable these three studies. Like was rightly observed, funding and research funding are fast dwindling. And I commend the researchers for their important work. Obviously, there is room for improvement. And I found one requiring further work to bring to even acceptable standards. There are other limitations and critiques I will not go into in this keynote address. But my final take is to congratulate everyone who made this day possible. And I thank RLS, particularly the country manager, Angela Oda, who has been my long time comrade in the struggle for a better Nigeria and women's rights, for inviting me to deliver this keynote address. Thank you all for listening. Our work, my work, your work is far from being done. And together we can continue to work to end gender-based violence, prevent and mitigate conflict, and foster peaceful coexistence in Nigeria towards sustainable democracy, development, and a particular inclusive development. Because lack of inclusive development also fosters conflict, including gender inequality, women's empowerment, and elimination of gender-based violence. So I rest my case and I thank you for listening.
So we're on your behalf, in like manner, showing to the world that these books have actually been published, and the 3 copies of them are actually now for viewing. And here they are, the 3 books that have been mentioned and discussed by Professor Joy Izelo, S-A-N-O-N, published by the RLF or RLS, Rosa Luxemburg Foundation of Reform in Nigeria. That will not be good. Photography is an art and science. Okay. The